Memorial Day week and 2 weeks, those 2 weeks were slow. And they were slow all around. But then as soon as we got past Memorial Day week, I felt a little bit more push. Summer's going to be slower, but there's always going to be those buyers that don't have the buyer fatigue yet, that are still like hungry and they need to find something.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Shawn and Matt Show. My name is Matt, that is Shawn, and welcome to our show. Shawn, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about listing price cuts in the Northern Virginia area, New York City broker fee ban for rentals. This is like a really hot topic in New York City. An update on our friends over at Pacaso, Shawn Pacaso Real Estate. Don't say timeshare. And then we're also going to get into in or out, whether Shawn Battle's in or out on a property. Shawn, let's start local. Northern Virginia. I love the Northern Virginia stories because they're the most relevant.
Yes.
Like, this is what we do day in and day out. And I think it's what we're both the most passionate about. Mm-hmm. And we've done statistics where we take a look at the Bright MLS and, hey, DC metro area. The DC metro area encompasses a lot of jurisdictions, a lot of locales, a lot of areas where you're like, wait, this is DC metro area?
Yeah.
So what I want to look at, Shawn, is specifically diving into Fairfax County, Alexandria, Arlington, taking a look at these jurisdictions because Gazette Leader came out with a study that said a total of 8.9% of homes on the market across the Washington region saw a reduction in listing price during the week ending June 16th, according to figures reported by Bright MLS, the multiple listing service. So across broad paint brushstroke, 8.9, basically 9% of homes in the DC region saw a price cut. Pretty high number, but we need context, right?
Right, I definitely
So
do.
Fairfax County saw a 9.1% decline in listing prices for the week compared to 5.7% a year ago. So a year ago in Fairfax, 5.7% of the houses on the market, so the properties on the market, decline in price. This year, 9. So we went from 5.7 to 9.
Okay.
Arlington, 9.8% of homes saw listing price drops compared to 8.6 last year. So about, 1.25 maybe. And then some of the larger numbers for the week ending in June 16th, Alexandria saw an 11.4% decrease, 7.7% in Loudoun County, and then Prince William County saw an 11.2% decrease in the listing prices for the week ending June 16th. So, Shawn, especially in Fairfax County, where we went from 5% of the listings up to 9%, and then in Arlington, we see 8.6 up to 9.8 year over year. That's not insignificant, right? Sure, it's 1%. But Arlington's like the smallest geographic county in the continental United States. So we have to parse these numbers down. What are your thoughts when you're looking at these numbers and you're seeing almost 10% of houses, 10% of properties are decreasing their listing price?
Yeah, it's a couple things here. All right. Number one, how many properties that you look at on the MLS are overpriced in your opinion? Right?
Lots.
And so that's one thing you have to always factor in is there is always going to be overpriced properties. And so those overpriced, I saw one yesterday. They came down in price. They're still overpriced, right? So a lot of times in these highly increasing value markets, it's hard to get a price. It's hard. So I don't want this news to scare anybody and say, oh my gosh, prices are falling, because I think there are errors in computations of what people think their value of their home is. And so when we go on listing appointments, we're always the people that say, sir, I don't think your value is quite that high. I mean, I'm happy to understand why you think it's that high, but I don't think it's that high. And so people tend to want to overprice and push that. So that's number one. That's the first factor that you've got to always think about is there's always going to be 10% of those people that want to overprice their property.
Yeah,
right?
What should that number be? Is 9% a healthy number?
Yeah,
like 1 out of 10?
Think about
almost?
it. 1 out of 10 people probably wants to overprice their house. And it's our job to say, listen, this is market value. So you have to, keep that in line. So I think I'm not really worried about that. Number two would be, again, we've seen such a price increase over the last couple of years, and it's been going and going. And in the single family market, we've seen huge increases. So again, it's hard after you see this big uptick of the spring market, right? What happens is the spring market pushes the values, and they'll push them quickly, and you'll see multiple contracts. And then what happens is the competition kind of wanes away because people are on vacation. The summer market hits. So all these people are then pricing on the last comparable sale. And the last comparable sale had 5 or 7 offers that pushed it up to that value. What was the actual value before they priced that? Where was that price before? So that little price dip, that price correction is because we had a boom, and now we're correcting for that boom slightly. And that's going to probably happen every year. And that's, I'm just speculating. I'm thinking that, out loud and as we go, why I think that could happen. The other thing I want to warn people about is that there is different segments in each market. And, I wrote about something today about Arlington and how, we can't compare Arlington as a DMV whole, right? Because Arlington is its own animal. And inside Arlington, we have different types of ownership. And those different types of ownership are all going to react or trade differently. And so some years, in my 20 years, some years the condo market is amazingly hot, single family market's lagging. And then now this year, the house market, the single family market is super strong, starting to pull back because of summer, but the condo market has been lagging. It's not that it's not strong, it's just not as strong. And so what happens there is, what I really want to see is what single family homes are doing and what condos are doing. And don't lump condos and townhouses into that. You need condos separately. You should probably be lumping townhouses more into the single family because there's just not as many in Arlington as far as single families and townhouses. So I would lump those two together, and I'd get condos alone. And I'd say, all right, let's look at these two separately and let's analyze this, because what pulls down the values is, as you do it as a whole, is condos. What pulls down or adds to the days of market on market compared to single families is the condos, right? And so if you're not taking those out and saying, let's parse them and figure out where this is going, you're never really going to know the truth about them.
I'm seeing a lot of overpriced condos come on the market. They're racking up the days on market. Some are adjusting price, but some are just on there with maybe not as much motivation as others. But you said something earlier, and it shouldn't be understated, that essentially if you list the same house, February 1st versus July 1st, that house is going to sell for a completely different price.
Yeah.
The buyers, they're not expecting, the July list. Everyone is kind of hungry, after hibernating over the winter, that they gobble up all the early spring listings. And so even if your house is the same or similar, there should be a completely different mindset for listing in the summer versus listing in the spring. And Shawn and I have said this before, the deals, if you're a buyer, the deals to be had are buying a house when no one else is, buying in the heat of the summer, buying in the dead of the winter.
Yeah.
These are the times where, you have the best opportunities to get the most value for your money.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example quickly. There's a building out there where I have a listing that I just priced, and if I went back and look at the comparable sales, and the sales, and this is the condo market, just to give you an idea, the sales in March and April shot through the roof. Like, you're pricing, let's just say a one bedroom for $460,000. Guess where that closed? $492,000.
Wow.
Another one, $475,000, went for $495,000. Those are worse units than the one I just sold. But I was like, listen, these are your comps, but look where they priced and look where they ended up. That market's gone. Don't price it there, and don't push it, to $500,000 because your unit's better. It's not there anymore. It's not going to take it. So we priced it slightly, and we priced it at $489,900. The client's expectation is like, oh, we're going to get multiple offers. No, you're probably not. Hopefully you get one and it sells. And we did, and we got full price, but it was a different market than it was then. So you have to be really careful on how you're pricing this, and you're not just saying, oh, look, the last sale's here. This is what we're pricing it at. You have to know the market. You have to know the ins and outs of spring, summer, fall, and winter.
Do you think we're still going to see more price increases as we get into summer?
Yeah, depending on what you're buying, right? Single families, they're still going to be competitive. And like I was saying, the Memorial Day week and 2 weeks, those 2 weeks were slow. And they were slow all around. But then as soon as we got past Memorial Day week, I felt a little bit more push. Summer's going to be slower, but there's always going to be those buyers that don't have the buyer fatigue yet, that are still like hungry and they need to find something. So they're still going to be out there. So yeah, I think in the single family market, you're still going to see some price increases, but not as crazy as we did in the spring. That's just the way it works every year. And so think about that on one side. And then, when you're thinking about price increases or median price or anything like that, are you talking about condos included? Because if you are, it's going to be a lot different. So
let us know your thoughts in the comment section below if you think that there are going to be more price decreases as we get into the summer months. Shawn, let's move on to our next article from slate.com. Why New York City real estate brokers are losing their minds. Shawn, I'm pretty excited to talk about this topic simply because I think there's going to be a lot of strong opinions, both from ourselves and from the viewers out there. What's happening in New York City in the real estate market is interesting. The rental market specifically, there is a new bill, New York City City Council bill that would save tenants from having to pay fees to real estate brokers who are hired by landlords. So the way you rent an apartment in New York City is an apartment gets listed. You as the tenant contact the listing broker. They show it to you. You never hired this listing broker, and then you pay the listing broker an exorbitant amount of money. So something like 1 month's rent, sometimes even higher. So to rent an apartment in New York City, you do first month's rent, you do deposit, and you do broker fee. Now, the broker is hired by the landlord. The landlord says, Shawn Battle, I want you to market and lease and write up the lease and do all that fun stuff. And then you're actually paid for by the tenant. Okay, so that's how that works. And so there's a new bill that says brokers, that the bill would save tenants from having to pay fees to real estate brokers that were hired by landlords, i.e. brokers that tenants did not hire. In other words, this article is by a journalist who went to a protest, okay? But the protest wasn't for renters. It wasn't, hey, let everyone help out the renters. It was for real estate agents. It was Corcoran. It was Douglas Elliman. It was bond brokers that were all there in matching hats. And all these brokers are upset because they want things to stay the same, Shawn. They want to be compensated by the tenants and hired by the landlord, which is fascinating and doesn't make any sense at all when you start to think about it. And New York City is only one of 2 cities in America that allows this practice, the other being Boston. Some of the arguments are saying from the brokers that they're saying agents are tenants too. Agents are also tenants. And so the agent doesn't want to have to, deal with that as well. And they're also saying that if the tenant no longer is paying the landlord's broker, rents are going to increase. So you have these kind of backwards arguments going on about why things must stay the same. Shawn, what are your thoughts on the New York City broker rental ban, possibly?
It's so funny because when you see it from an outside perspective, and New York, I knew New York was different in this. You see it in plain sight, right? We don't do it that way here, and guess what? The landlords pay us.
So how do we do it?
To pay it. So basically, the difference is over in New York, the tenant is actually paying all brokerage fees, which is crazy. That's a lot of money to come up with. I helped my brother find a place in New York City years ago, and that was the case. It was like, holy cow! And I showed it to him. They just gave me a combo, and I just went in and showed it. But he still had to pay all those fees. Which, think about that. If you're paying $4,000 a month, there's first month's rent, $4,000 for your deposit, and then maybe $4,000 or more, sometimes double, right? Mm-hmm. So right there is $12,000, $15,000 you got to come up with just to rent a place for a year. That's insanity. So the way that we do it here is that we sign a listing agreement, and that listing agreement states that, again, there's a cooperation there. There's a cooperation. The landlord signs the agreement and says, we will pay you as an example, 1 month's rent for the entire process, which I'll let you know that a lot of times there's no money in rentals, okay? And that's the truth. But say it's 1 month's rent, but that 1 month's rent is then split sometimes 50-50, sometimes 25-75, whatever that listing says is going to be split with the buyer agency or the rental.
So the tenant doesn't actually pay out of their own pocket.
No, the tenant does not pay out of their own pocket. They have a deposit and they have the first month's rent. And typically the deposit goes to the owner and the landlord, and the first month's rent is used for the commissions. And so that landlord never has to write a check, but they don't get the first month's rent.
Right.
So that's how that kind of works, and that's where the money comes from. And honestly, I'm sorry, New York, but you know what? I see it. I understand change is hard, and we just went through huge changes with commissions, complete shake up in the industry, and it's still changing, and it's hard. It's hard. Believe me, I was upset, and I didn't want the change to happen either. But there's always a workaround, and you're always going to make money. And I don't think people are just going to say, "Oh, we're done with this. We're not going to pay anything. Brokers aren't going to make anything," because you're providing a service. What you have to understand is that the landlord's going to have to pay, and maybe they're just not going to get the first month's rent. Maybe those commissions come down. There's going to be a shakeup, but the reality is this is the way the rest of the country does it. And Corcoran and all these other companies that you're talking about, they're not just in New York, right? They're licensed in multiple states. They do rentals in every other area. Learn from it. That's the problem. I'm sorry to say it, but this is the reality of it. Is change happens, and tenants are paying through the nose. Tenants are paying like crazy. How often do people have $15,000 just to throw over to say, "I want to rent a place in New York City"? It's impossible. It's really hard for people, and that's adding costs like that is hard. So
this is the most backward situation that I've ever heard of, and I'm surprised it's taken this long for. I think this individual has introduced this bill a couple times, and now it has like 26 co-signers, and it's working its way through. And someone from Corcoran said, and we're not singling out Corcoran, but a gentleman said, if this passes, we won't be able to afford to live in our own communities. This is so astronomically like blinding, because what about the tenants? Yeah. What about a renter who's like actually also trying to afford to live in their own community? And this person is essentially saying, because the tenant's not paying me 1 month's rent, because they didn't hire me, I'm not going to be able to afford to live in my own community. Someone else is saying that my livelihood is going to be ruined. This livelihood is built on a backwards system that
it really is.
Really, I mean, there's horror stories left and right. One horror story involved a tenant who was asked to pay a $15,000 broker fee on an $1,100 a month rent stabilized apartment. So you can essentially ask for any sort of broker fees. My wife's brother was looking for a place in New York, and he's about to sign all the paperwork, and then they said, "Oh yeah, by the way, that's like $3,600 that you owe us." And he may have used their services for like 5 minutes. Like there was no extra value provided. So, I'm a real estate agent. So you say we're outsiders. We're kind of like we're also real estate agents, but to play like the world's smallest violin for these real estate agents that are protesting in their gingham shirts and their matching hats, when the average salary for a real estate agent in New York City is $276,000, like you're gonna have a hard time for me to believe that these agents are victims.
Yeah, and this is what breeds the whole problem with real estate and why these lawsuits are up, because who's representing who and what's going on here? It's such a, there's no, for the tenant to pay for a broker that represents the landlord, right?
That they didn't hire.
That they did not hire is totally backwards.
Almost like a middleman, like an unnecessary middleman.
Yeah, if I own a house and I want it rented, you're providing me a service. You're getting me the people that I need. I need to pay you, right? The landlord needs to pay for the service. It's not the tenant that comes by and says, "Oh, I like this apartment. Can I have it?" Yeah, pay pay all fees. That's insanity.
Shawn, the argument is the landlord can't afford it if they were to
totally
pay.
afford it. They can totally afford it if they can afford it in Northern Virginia and they can afford it in Omaha, Nebraska.
In every other city. Yeah.
They can afford it in New York City. Sorry to say it, guys. And I know that a lot of the industry is rental in New York City, and it's a big way of business. But man, it's backwards. Sorry to say it, and it's going to have to change. It's just like all of real estate is changing quickly. And the thing is that what I'll say as a real estate agent that people don't understand is there is a lot of work. It's not just opening a door and oh yeah. There's a ton of work that goes on behind the scenes that people don't understand. And I've talked about this many times. There's stress involved. There's running all the time. It's not an easy job. And for people to say that it's an easy job, they don't get it, right? But at the same time, changes happen, and this needs to change, to be honest, right?
The most work is probably being a renter's agent, like going around town trying to, hopefully get 25 to 50% of, $3,000, and you're up against multiple applications. That's when, if I'm a New York City landlord, yeah, I want to be offering, I want to be paying that tenant agent. Sure, I'll pay my own agent, but I want to be, compensating those people that are busting their butts on the subway trying to, find their clients some new rentals.
Yeah, and just so you know, like in this area in Northern Virginia, a lot of times, say you have a $4,000 rental, and that's pretty high, but $4,000 rental, a lot of times that agent that's running you around to see all these different places makes 25% of that $4,000. So $1,000 to run you forever and ever. That's actually pretty high, right? The typical rent in Arlington, might be, I don't know, $2,600, $3,000. So you're making under $1,000. You're making $800. Then your broker takes a portion. Then you got to pay the fees. You're left with like $600, $500. It's not worth it. It's so much work, and believe me, tenants are they want things their way, right? And landlords, they want their way. And so it's a big negotiation sometimes, and it's a lot of stress for nothing.
So the agents are also saying that rents are going to be higher. I think that's up for the market to determine. Yeah. I don't think agents are the ones to say, oh, if this fee goes away, rents are going to be higher. And we should also touch on the no fee rentals in the city. If you go on Street Easy, I believe that's where people are looking. There's no fee rentals that you can search, and essentially what that means is that you don't have to pay this exorbitant amount. So maybe that's like a for rent by owner, or they've already worked out some other sort of deal. So I'm not sure how prolific tenant agents are in New York City, but unless I'm missing something, I think New York City is vastly behind the times, and the argument of it's always been done this way or this can only be done in New York City is tired, and quite frankly, it needs to be reworked.
Yeah, and I'll preface that with, we don't know New York. We've never worked in New York. We don't do our business there, so maybe we're missing something. But I see it as totally backwards, to be honest. That's just me.
And if every other city, if there's only 2 cities in America that even allow this to happen, do we think those 2 cities are correct? Or do we think that 99.9% of cities, are correct? Yeah. So I'll leave you to discuss amongst yourself in the comment section below. Shawn, let's move on to our next article. And this is checking in on Pacaso, Shawn Pacaso Real Estate. So we discussed Pacaso, it must have been like a couple years ago now. They've done a lot. So Pacaso is a co-ownership real estate group venture where you can buy up to between 1/8 and 1/2 of a house, but with 7 other people or with 1 other person. And they've been valued at $1.5 billion. They've got hundreds of millions of money in seed funding, backed by SoftBank, all of this kind of glitz and glamour of a startup. And they're still chugging along, and they've released some new, pretty cool features, I would say. Now, really what they're after is the luxury vacation market. So imagine let's just say you live in California, okay, and you want to go, skiing or something in Park City. And every year you're going skiing, the weekly rentals is like $4,000, $5,000. Now it's up to $10,000. You're thinking, okay, well, why don't I just buy a place? Okay, well, buying a place, you might be at like a $4 or $5 million house at that point, and then you're like, okay, well, this is a little bit too much. But what if you could just buy a little bit? You're only going to go for a couple weeks, and so that's where Pacaso comes in. Now it's not a timeshare because you actually have ownership rights in Pacaso. So Pacaso sets up an LLC, and you are part of the LLC. And eventually, if the property were to sell, you would be getting proceeds as opposed to a timeshare where it's pretty hard to get out of a timeshare and you don't actually get the benefits of, owning said property. So now, Shawn, what they're doing is Pacaso's adding third-party listings to their website. So in essence, what Pacaso does is, with all of their funding and their backing, they go out to Hilton Head, they go to Palm Springs, they go to Park City, they go to these vacation destinations, and they say, this $5 million property, we're going to buy it. They buy it, they furnish it, and then they put it on the Pacaso website. Now what they're doing is they're kind of doing the reverse. They're pulling listings from third-party sites like Zillow and saying, hey, this looks like a cool house. If you're interested, click this button. If enough people are interested, we're going to buy it. And then, you're going to have the opportunity to own, 1/8 or up to a half of this house. So, Shawn, what do you think about Pacaso? Now that it's been a couple years, they first launched in 2020. The original offering shares were around like the $200,000 range. They even go up to as high as $1 million or more. And this is to get into, like, there's a house in Napa Valley. The shares are $1.5 million each. I mean, this is like a $12 million house. And, you can get in for, only, air quotes, $1.5 million. So what are your thoughts on some of these moves?
Brilliant. Totally brilliant. What is the problem with home ownership or fronting the costs is cost, right? It's carrying costs for all these properties. You're buying a multi-million-dollar home, then you're furnishing it, then you're holding it, and you're paying the bill on this until somebody says, oh, I'll buy it. What better plan than to use third-party listings, use the Zillows, whatever, and put it on your site. You can cherry pick which ones you think are great, right? Cherry pick the highest, coolest places, and you say, all right, who would be interested at $500,000 per share times 8 people, all right? So there you go. You're at a $4 million property. Who's in, right? And now the upfront cost goes away because now you're just almost facilitating. We'll buy it, but then you're going to pay us a little bit more because we're going to buy the property, we're going to furnish it, we're going to prep it for you. And then, but I mean, that is just a great way of seeing forward and saying, all right, how do we reduce the upfront cost and just put it on somebody else and have them sign the contract to begin with? It's like so brilliant.
Yeah, I'm kind of hot and cold on this because there's a lot of areas where this would work and there's a lot of areas that it would not work. So, for instance, Seabrook Island, South Carolina, what's really cool is that once Pacaso's bought the house, they can put it on Zillow, okay? And now they're selling a $5 million house on Zillow for $675,000. And so when you see a 5,000 square foot, 7-bath house for $675,000, you're going to get a lot of traffic and you're going to get a lot of interest. So I think that's pretty interesting. But there's also houses in Arlington, Virginia that are on the Pacaso site.
No way.
So this, $3 million house is on the market in North Arlington. And Shawn, you can, and 7 of anonymous people, you don't actually know the other owners, you can get into this house for $522,281. Okay? But the problem with that is I don't know too many people that are vacationing in North Arlington.
Yeah,
I don't know
one.
too many people that want to spend 44 days out of the year, in Country Club Hills. And so this whole adding third-party listings, all right, we can add listings from anywhere, but primarily they're targeting upper price bracket, southern, warm weather properties. Couple issues with that. I mean, number one, regulations. So they've already gone in lawsuits against at least one city in the West from someone that the city said that they weren't allowed to operate. They're a timeshare. They don't allow timeshares. And the other issue is regulations because this is kind of like Airbnb where it could be gone here today, gone tomorrow. And so you start buying these houses. Now, what I understand is that they buy it as an LLC. Are LLCs allowed to buy houses? I think so, right? You can buy a house.
Yeah.
Now, when it gets into HOAs, that's when you may have issues because all of Hilton Head is an HOA. There's every single little enclave is an HOA. And so there may be some, rules and restrictions about renting out in the covenants, like renting out to different parties or one single individual family. So I'm a little concerned that Pacaso's kind of just plowing their way through all of these like legalese red tape, and it may just come to a crash when people realize that they can actually just ban Pacaso listings in their area.
Yeah, they could. I mean, they could put restrictions on how many owners, I guess. I mean, but the thing is, this isn't a timeshare, in my opinion. This is a co-ownership. It's not timeshare. Co-ownership is different. Timeshare is like you pay fees and you go and rent and you pay forever and you never stop paying. This is, you could pay off the mortgage and you're done. And then any increases in value, you're an eighth of an owner of that property. So it's different. So to get around that, I don't know how they would get around it. I mean, they would have to implement new laws and saying, okay, well, this isn't a rental, because I guess, in some instances they'd have to say, well, you can't short-term rent this, right? You have 44 days, you have X amount of weeks per year, but you have to use it or not use it. You're not renting it to anybody.
So you can never rent it out. Like if you owned a share, like 1/8 is basically like 44 days.
Yeah.
You have to use those shares.
Or lose them.
Your family has to use them, or you have to like gift them to someone. Like you have to give them to me.
Okay, so there's your answer. So it's not a rental, right? And that's where a lot of these laws, short-term rental stuff, won't apply but they're going to have to change.
But what will the court say when there's 8 different people and 8 different families renting these out?
They're not renting them, though. They own them, right? They're on the deed inside this LLC. So that's where it's different, right? And so there is no rental. So you can get around the law now. But what they could say is, okay, we're not allowing more than 2 parties to own a house or something like that. And that's where they could get them. I don't know how they do that. I mean, there's a lot of rules, and I'm speculating at this point, but that's the only way they could do it. Now, HOAs can simply pass something fairly quickly and say, well, 1 owner per house, family members or whatever, and that's it. It can't be people that don't know each other owning. And maybe they can get around it in that way, but I think it's a little harder. But we could see kind of the same trend where we saw with Airbnb, right? Airbnb just went through and they started plowing through, and they're like, people renting places in like Lake Barcroft, and then the HOA gets pissed off and all the neighbors are pissed, and they're like, wait a second, we gotta stop this. How do we regulate it? So it could be that same thing, because they're plowing forward in a different way, in a different type of ownership that we're not used to. And then people get word of it and they're like, wait a second, that doesn't seem right. Maybe I don't want 8 people coming for whatever reason. And it could become an issue. I think it's a little harder to enact rather than, banning Airbnbs because they're short-term rentals. But this is ownership. So it's got to be, I don't know. It's going to be a little different. It's fun to watch.
So the company claims that they have about 1,500 owners and a few hundred properties. So a few hundred properties to me, Shawn, is like 200 or maybe like less than 200. Should be noted that their co-founder is Spencer Raskoff, who, as you know, is the co-founder of Zillow and former Zillow CEO. So they've got some pretty big backing behind this. What gets me, so the company was launched in 2020. What was everyone doing real estate-wise in 2020? They were trying to buy houses. They were trying to buy second homes, okay? Now, the whole Pacaso business model, to me, appears to be, let's go out and buy a $10 million property, okay? Now, Pacaso, they make money a couple different ways, right? So we're talking about these 1/8 shares. You add up the 1/8 share, and it's, times 8. That price is a lot higher than the actual sales price. So if it's like a $5 million house, 8 times by 8 for the 8 people with the 8 shares, it's gonna be like 6.5, $7 million. So there's like pretty big premium, on these shares. So if you were to find like 7 friends, you could, get it a little cheaper. But then there's also the monthly maintenance cost. So Pacaso does everything, right? They do the property management, they keep the lights on, they keep it clean. There's got to be some sort of upcharge on that as well. So they're making money there. And then, let's see, finally, there was one other aspect in addition to the monthly upkeep. The reserve fund. So things go wrong, HVAC, heat pump stops, water heater issues. So you also have a reserve fund. So they say you can split up the costs 8 ways, which you do, but it's the carrying costs of this are pretty high, Shawn. So what I'm getting at is if your business model is to buy $10 million properties and then to find 8 people to buy them off of you, that's good when it's good. I mean, what happens when the market starts slowing down? So it's almost like open door, right? Where you're like buying and then hoping to like resell it really quickly. So I'd be curious to know, and maybe I can do a little bit more digging, how long these properties are on the Pacaso market. Like how long does it take? Because before 8 people buy them. Because I've gone on the site and a couple of the different listings that Pacaso has, it says like 1 share left. And so I'm not sure if that's just a, dare I say, gimmick to say like, oh, there's just 1 share left. I'm pretty sure that would be like illegal, so it probably isn't. But a surprising amount say 1 share left. So I wonder what the carrying costs look like. So I think what I'll do after this episode is look at like a financial statement to see. They're definitely not public, but I would love to understand the expenses and the carrying costs on something like this.
Yeah, and it's funny, like you see 1 share left, $675, but is that the same price that the other people paid or that have been owning it for 2 years?
It's got to be.
Or is it, or has that gone down because of the market or up because of the market? That's the other thing. And I'll tell you, as a recent co-owner of a property, 2 owners, well, actually 4 on the deed because it's my sister and my brother-in-law and me and my wife, right? But there are a lot of costs that go into these properties, and especially as you get into these multi-million-dollar properties, and then they're using their own people, their own cleaners. They're upcharging. They probably own the companies that are all doing the work in there, right? So they're making money on the back ends of each of the services, but there was a lot of carrying costs that have to go into it, and it's almost like you're almost buying a condo, right? In this instance, it's almost like a condo building because you've got to have fees for this, fees for that, all your electricity. Then you have the maintenance fees, right? To in case something does go wrong, you need the money there. You can't be like, hey, you each owe us this. No, you got to do it up front and make that account big enough so that when it's needed, you can.
I'm curious, for your own personal co-ownership property, how did you work with your co-buyers, who are family, to spell out the rules for who gets 4th of July, who gets Christmas, how do you know your brother-in-law is not going to go rogue and take 4th of July weekend every single year?
AI. No, honestly, I went to AI and I was like, can you write me rules for our ownership of this property? ChatGPT, yep. And it spit out some rules, and I sent those over to everybody, and they're like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, some of these are okay, but let's form. So I went back in and I analyzed it, blah, blah, blah. But, the good thing is we're family, and maybe the bad thing is we're family, but, this first year is just a test. It's like, we have rules, but at the same time, this year we're like, hey, let's just all go and enjoy it, and let's see how it progresses. Because at the first we were like, all right, we're going to Airbnb, we're going to make all this money back and just supplement the payment, because we're not looking to make money on this. We're looking for a lifestyle change. But at the same time, we think we're going to rent it, and then we're like, well, I just want to use it this summer. We're excited to get in there and just have fun with it. So I think it's going to be a learning process, just like everything else. And there's no real hardcore strict rules, but we do have some guidelines that we've created.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how that works out, because you say your family, and that's a good thing. It's good when things are going well, but then
it's bad when it's bad.
Something happens, and it's like, oh my gosh, we're family.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll be sure to continue to monitor Pacaso as things progress. Again, I'm hot and cold, so they're doing some cool things, but I also have some reservations.
Yeah, a smart move using third-party listings, to be honest.
All right, Shawn, let's get into in or out, whether you are in or out on a property. We're going to go to Waterford, Virginia. Shawn, you know Waterford?
I don't.
It's just past Leesburg on the way to Lovettsville.
Really?
Okay, so in that general area. This property is listed for $1.799, basically 1.8. 4 beds, 5 baths, 4,000 square feet. This remarkable home seamlessly blends historic elegance with contemporary comforts. From the meticulously designed kitchen to the luxurious butler's pantry and inviting living room, every detail has been thoughtfully curated. Featuring 4 bedrooms and 4.5 bathrooms, this home also boasts a flagstone patio, 3 working fireplaces, and beautifully landscaped grounds with a gated garden. HVAC, electrical, and plumbing systems have all been updated, ensuring modern reliability. Located in the heart of Waterford, you'll enjoy the tranquil village atmosphere while being just a short drive from modern conveniences. Built in 1801, the house has a rich history. And then it goes on to talk about the history. So, Shawn, Waterford, Virginia. $1.8 million. Are you in or out?
You know, you said Waterford, and I was like, I don't know where it is, but I think I do. I think
you
I actually
do.
drove through this going to Lovettsville. I went a different way, and there was this small town I went through. I was like, wow, this is real. It's super small, right?
Super small.
But super cool and super cute.
So
So
there
I
it is
think I
right
have
there.
been through here. Yeah.
So and then we have Lovettsville just north right
Yep.
there.
Yep. Yes. Exactly. Two roads.
Yeah,
and I went
two
one
roads.
of those roads. Yeah.
Yep.
It was a very cool, very
You may have
cool
driven by the
spot.
house. It's on Main Street.
Yeah. You know, how much is it?
1.8.
1.8 million in Waterford. I mean, I'm probably not a player on this. I think it's a beautiful house. It's a historic house. Again, I'm always pulled back on the historic stuff. I just like my modern conveniences. And yes, they've done a lot of really good stuff to this. It looks modern inside. But then you've also got, you know, baseboard heat. You've got radiator heating. You've got some old pine floors that were probably from 1800. So there are things that you're going to have to give up when you're
Isn't
buying
radiator heat like the most effective type of
this.
heating?
It really is. It is. It's the best type of heat. But at the same time, like, I don't like these big boxes of, you know, a radiator sitting in your living room. It's just ugly, right? So, however, you are right. It is really good heat. So Waterford, I'm not so familiar with. It's a cool town, but 1.8 out there is a lot of money. And if I'm moving out to those areas, I'm looking to reduce costs, not increase costs. So for that reason and those reasons, I'm not going to purchase this one.
Okay. Well, that allows me to purchase it, Shawn. You know, 1.8, I think in a couple of years, we're going to look at this and say, man, I can't believe someone got this for 1.8. This house is incredible. It's, you know, it's right on a prominent corner. So little privacy bushes, little privacy shrubs can help out with that. But it's huge, right? It's 5,000 square feet. It has, it's not handicapped by 1800 house problems, right? Like it has an open kitchen. It has a basement. It might be more of a functional basement for storage. It has the high ceilings. It has open rooms. It also has, like you said, some of the original or what look like refinished hardwood floors. So I'm all about the house. As much as I would love land, you know, if I were to look at another like Virginia countryside house, I think an in-town house, like an in-town compound, where you can walk the town. Now, I'm fully aware that there's not much to walk, but to be right in town, I think is incredible. Love that it's from, you know, the 1800s, and I'm all in. I love the house. I'm in.
Good. Yeah, honestly, it looks really well done. You know, the ceilings, the walls, everything looks really well taken care of, redone. But, you know, I'm just, you know, I don't want to live out there, I guess. I guess that's me.
If the house was built in 2020, would you be more interested?
Maybe.
It's more of
Maybe.
a price thing.
Yeah, more of a price thing going out to Waterford, right? I mean, like I said, if I'm moving out to Waterford, I think I'm wanting land and I'm wanting, you know, access to fishing and things like that. That's just
Okay.
me. So
on the next episode of the Shawn and Matt Show, I'll have to find Shawn a house near Waterford with land that's newer,
Yes.
that has its own like stocked private
stream in the
pond.
back or
I
pond
just saw
or lake.
this house nowhere. It's in the southwest part of Virginia, 1,000 acres, and it's got its own stream, and it's like they're marketing it to like fly fishers and stuff like that.
yeah.
And the property video had like some person like catching big old fish.
That's cool stuff.
I'll have to send you the listing. It may be above your price range,
Yeah,
but hey,
1,000 acres.
if you get 7 other people,
There
on
you
that,
go, Pacaso. Put it on your website.
Yeah, put it on the Pacaso website. All right, well, that's just gonna about do it for another episode of the Shawn and Matt Show. If you like this, be sure to hit the thumbs up button, comment down below, and for Shawn and myself, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Take care.